Welcome to Moments in Time with Lucy and Byfield. Today we shall look back on the history of the Italian Grand Prix. With cars like Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, drivers like Farina, Ascari, Scarfiotti, Nuvolari, Fagioli and Campari, to name a few, and Monza track sections with names such as Curva Grande, the Curva di Lesmo, the Variante Ascari, and the Curva Parabolica, the Italian Grand Prix is full of heritage and glory, but also tragedy. It is the longest serving race in the history of Formula One, so let us take a look at some truly fascinating moments in time. It is September the 10th, 1989, and the 12th round of the Formula One Championship is being contested at Monza in Italy. The World Championship is seemingly in the hands of Alain Prost, yet Senna is hanging on, despite having borne the brunt of reliability issues. It is the second year of the most famous of teammate rivalries in history, battling for glory in the truly iconic McLaren Honda team. If you were following back then, you will know all about the tension and animosity between the two titans of F1. Let us backtrack. In 1988, Senna had seemingly the better run at times, and without question had a purple patch where he was untouchable, with a massive car advantage over Prost, even on the straight at Monza, prompting widespread favouritism talks, not just from the French. Prost, knowing he was losing that day in '88, turned up the boost and caused Senna concern, much like he did in Monaco '88, and Senna once again fell for the bait. Ayrton turned up the wick, resulting in not having enough fuel to race hard at the end, and with only a couple of laps to go, he lost his edge, tangled with the backmarker, and handed a 1-2 finish to Ferrari, just weeks after the death of the Scuderia's founder, Enzo Ferrari. Berger that day broke the McLaren stranglehold on the season by at least depriving the Maccas of one win in a truly dominant season. Ayrton Senna was to win the title in '88, but here in Monza '89, Prost had a sniff more than a race win's advantage in points and would leave with a 20-point advantage once the weekend was done. However, the weekend was not going Prost's way at all, especially regarding his relationship with his team, of whom he had finally announced to that he was joining Ferrari in 1990. Prost had announced earlier in the season that he was leaving McLaren, but with no destination, apparently, although Williams and Ferrari made it very clear that they wanted him. Ron Dennis, always one to be competitive, to take things personally and hold a grudge, was convinced he would see Prost have a break and possibly come back to the team, not for a minute to drive for the ultimate enemy, Ferrari. So, Prost was greeted early in the weekend by a plate of pasta and a bottle of red wine in his cockpit, and certain members of the team were making sure he knew they were not impressed. Prost qualified fourth behind Senna on his customary pole and with the two Ferraris ahead. So, to the race. Senna bolted, but Prost, canny as ever, made his way up to second eventually. Senna was in a class of his own and headed for a win, but suffered an engine failure and spun on his own oil, creating a roar from the newly Prost-loving Tifosi. The irony in that crowd response was that only a few years earlier, Prost needed protection from the Tifosi, who would throw bottles and rocks at him and cheer if he broke down. Yet, here was Prost driving a McLaren being cheered as he crossed the line to take his final career McLaren win. They cheered because he was at least in spirit a Ferrari driver now. I tell this story to reveal the true heart of Monza. That is, it is all about the Ferrari-loving fans, the disciples, fanatics, and completely biased followers of the Scuderia, no matter what nationality of driver is in the cockpit. Japan has fanatical fans, we are seeing the rise of the Dutch at the moment too, and a few other countries are truly passionate as well, though nothing compares to the Tifosi, a name derived from the concept of being infected with typhus. Ponder that for a moment. To make matters worse for Prost, he was to get carried away with the emotion and podium celebration and toss his trophy to the adoring fans below, incurring the wrath of Ron Dennis. Now, for those who are unaware, and this is also one of the reasons Lewis Hamilton left McLaren, it has long been written into the contracts of McLaren drivers that their trophies earned do not belong to them, but to the team. And with Prost tossing this trophy, the McLaren Trophy cabinet was missing the 1989 Monza Winners' Trophy for many years. Prost would eventually get a replica made and present it to Ron many years later. So, Italy, Monza, the Italian Grand Prix. Simply to the majority of fans, it is about Ferrari, and countless races where Ferrari were not competitive or broke down midway would see a mass exodus of fans leaving the circuit before the race was finished. Such was the irrelevance of any other car winning when not a Ferrari. Having said that, Ferrari have managed to win a staggering 19 times, but not since Fernando Alonso in 2010. In theory, the 2019 Ferrari should be in with a shout, but we have been saying that all year long, and they keep failing for one reason or another, until of course, young Charles Leclerc finally scored his maiden Formula 1 win in Belgium. Tainted by the death of friend and fellow racer Antoine Hubert, Charles was not able to celebrate or appreciate his first win in the manner it deserved. So, if he were to win again in Monza, he may celebrate in a way we didn't see at Spa. On top of that, if he were to win in Italy for the prancing horse, he would be deified for life. Monza has given us some amazing races and crashes over the years. Look up the amazing crash in 1981 for John Watson, testing out the strength of the new carbon fibre chassis, proving John Barnard's genius at the time, changing the DNA of Formula 1 to this day. Christian Fittipaldi was to have a crash so unique in '93 that it almost looks like a cartoon. He would flip his car across the finish line after colliding with teammate Martini and land perfectly straight, continuing along a white line in perfect order, as if on a Scale-X trick track. Derek Warwick would test out his dodgy 1990 Lotus by slamming it into the guardrail coming onto the main straight, sliding upside down, and with his helmet scraping on the ground. Now he would take the restart, clearly more brawn than brains. Either way, remarkable. David Coulthard would spin out of the lead on the warm-up lap in 1995, but due to a crash, he would take the restart in pole position. Think about that, he spun out of pole on the warm-up lap. But it was Damon Hill, being a total clown, who would steal the show, taking out Schumacher, gifting a win to Herbert in the Benetton. Monza has a very tainted history too regarding fatalities for both drivers and spectators. A marshal would be killed in 2000 when a massive collision saw multiple cars crash out of the race. This is a fact often overlooked when Formula 1 boasts of the limited number of casualties in Formula 1. Of course they refer to drivers, forgetting marshals and fans. Sadly, Ronnie Peterson was to lose his life after a massive shunt in '78, where Riccardo Patrese was apportioned the blame for many years, and James Hunt, even as a commentator, never forgave him. Posthumous world champion in 1970, Jochen Rindt, was also to lose his life here in qualifying, yet had such a points haul that he still won the title even though the season was not over. The list goes on, with the death of Wolfgang von Trips in 1961, also killing 14 spectators. But from as early as 1928, Italy was to witness multiple drivers and spectators lose their lives, and with the death of Giuseppe Campari in 1933, a driver that Enzo Ferrari was close to, a percentage of the joy in racing was gone for him. Now let's look back on some famous wins. There were final career wins for John Surtees in 1967, driving for Honda, Heinz-Harald Frentzen driving for Jordan in '99, and that was the race when Mika Hakkinen spun out of an easy lead and was later seen crying under the trees. And let us not forget Rubens Barrichello winning for the last time in 2009, driving for Brawn, making future champ Jenson Button sweat in that second part of the season. In 1971, we saw the closest finish in Formula 1 history, with Peter Gethin beating Ronnie Peterson, with the top 5 covered by 0.61 of a second. In 2001, Juan Pablo Montoya would win for the first time in Formula 1 for the Williams BMW team. Jackie Stewart would get his first career win in 1965. Sebastian Vettel would also get his first career win, and at the time become the youngest winner in Formula 1 history when he was driving for the Minardi team, the Toro Rosso team. Now Seb was to win in dire wet conditions that day when all of the big names were all out at sea, and we were to witness the finger for the first time, an image that would inflame those who saw it as an aggressive German trait. Michael Schumacher would win at Monza in his first year with Ferrari after hitting a tyre bundle at the chicane, the same bundle that would take out championship leader Hill and others like Irvine and Villeneuve. Damon would have won the title that day had he kept his lead and won. In 1993 we saw Prost nearly win for the 52nd time, but with a few laps to go his engine blew up, costing the Professor the chance of a truly dominant and deserved final GP career win. Ironically, in that same race, Senna, usually a master at Monza, punted out Brundle when bored and lacking concentration mid-race. Well, that's it for Moments in Time with Lucien Byfield. Forza Ferrari! Arrivederci a tutti!